Israel confirmed that they are still willing to talk, and they have new conditions though. What are these conditions? These conditions are the Palestinian resistance needs to be disarmed completely, and Israel needs to have security control over Gaza. Alongside demands, look, Hamas, you can't release the bodies of the Israeli prisoners of war or the Israeli prisoners of war in general, because Israel had a problem with these ceremonies that Hamas have because of the image and how much it affects Israel, debunks the whole lies of Israel. And now it looks like there's a bit of give and take. What's happening exactly? Well, Israel is firstly saying, we're still willing to negotiate. We're still willing to negotiate, but we have new conditions. These new conditions are, of course, completely rejected by Hamas, especially in relation to the disarming of Hamas. However, Hamas showed willingness to not have ceremonies if they will release further Israeli bodies, which means they will still have ceremonies if they release Israeli prisoners of war who are alive. But with the bodies, they said, okay, we can skip that potentially. Okay, what is the proposal now? Well, there were multiple talks from sources. Again, nothing has been made official yet, but clearly there are counter proposals coming from the mediators, and they're applying pressure on Israel to go back and release those people, because Hamas told them that we're not talking up until these people are released. So the situation now is Israel and the mediators are coming to the Palestinian resistance with these offers to try and resolve the problem so that the ceasefire doesn't completely collapse. What are these proposals? Well, the proposal is Israel saying, okay, we might actually release 300. We want to release 300 Palestinians who were supposed to be released following the release of the Israeli prisoners of war, the 6 on Saturday. And after that, we will release a further 300. So we want to release 300. Hamas need to release 2 bodies. Hamas were due to release 4 bodies on Saturday. Israel saying, okay, let's hurry this up though. Hamas release 2 bodies, we'll release 300, and then we will release the further 300 in the next round. In the next round, as in the next few days. So we're talking about a deal that can happen potentially within 24 hours. Within 24 hours, Israel might say, yeah, that's fine, we reached a deal, and we're going to release 300. Hamas are going to be releasing 2. But there's a problem. What is that problem? That problem is, well, Hamas now are not saying that they're going to release the bodies to Israel. So it's no longer a case of handing them to the Red Cross and then them going to Israel from Gaza, either to the Karm Abu Salem crossing, Kerem Shalom crossing, or any of the other crossings. Where would they go? What are they going to do with the bodies? They're going to send them to Egypt. Egypt will take the bodies of the Israelis who were killed by Israel, who Israel killed in Gaza during the genocide. And following that, the Palestinian resistance will monitor how Israel is complying and then move on from there. And that's a very interesting development. Why? Because we don't know if Egypt would keep them in case of an Israeli lack of compliance. So if Israel doesn't comply, is Egypt gonna keep them up until they say, yeah, move them on? What's gonna happen exactly? This is a very interesting development that is not in the favor of Israel. And that's because of their arrogance and stubbornness and Benjamin Netanyahu making things difficult. So you're no longer gonna have Israel is going to Israel directly. In case of this prospect succeeding, the prospect of this new deal, 300 in exchange for 2, and then another 300 in exchange for 2, and then we're out of the way with phase 1. In case that succeeds, that is, unless Israel decides tomorrow, fine, we'll release the 600 and just release the rest of them, the remaining 4. So it's tricky. Israel is making it difficult, like they always have been. They're used to breaching the agreements. And all of that is stemming from a frustration from Benjamin Netanyahu primarily, from Benjamin Netanyahu and his close allies, with the fact that they haven't been able to impose their will on the Palestinian resistance. They haven't been able to demolish the Hamas. They haven't been able to impose anything until they came to the negotiating table. And that's something Netanyahu did not want to do. Why? Well, because it's showing that these people are still there, number one, and two, that they're strong. And the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu finally submitted to the same deal or the same core principles of Hamas, with the red lines of getting the aid, ending the war, getting all of the people back to the north, and then later on to rebuild Gaza and have a prisoner exchange. The formula of the current ceasefire is in that shape, with, of course, different wording, slight amendments, slight adjustments, so that it doesn't look as damaging for Benjamin Netanyahu. That's also a massive blow for him. And that's why he hasn't released the details of the ceasefire agreement in Israel. And now we only have certain speculations or certain confirmations coming about the next phases or the next moves of the ceasefire in a way that Benjamin Netanyahu can try and spin around. And some of his moves now are also to show that he is dictating what's happening. It's an act of showing authority, showing who's boss. When Hamas, from their side, they actually had several statements that we can force Israel to comply with the ceasefire agreement. So there is, at the end of the day, a solid ceasefire agreement. How is that being taken in Israel? Well, firstly, it's being opposed heavily by the security establishment. Benjamin Netanyahu had a meeting with the top security leaders inside of Israel before he made that decision. And during that meeting, they told him no, they advised against it. They said you should not delay the release of the Palestinians, because that would in exchange lead to Hamas saying that no, we're not actually going to release the remaining bodies. And we saw that now, 1 or 2 days just after those meetings took place. So after he got that advice and all of them said no, he went on to have another meeting. Again, look at how much he disregards the opinion of the security establishment inside of Israel. Then there are more harsh tones, harsh statements coming from the people in Israel. Firstly, there are more confirmations coming from the families of the prisoners of war that Israel almost killed their loved ones. Ilya Cohen, who was released by Hamas, he said that he miraculously survived after the tunnel in which he was held collapsed following an Israeli airstrike. That was published on the Israeli channel 12 today. Then they're receiving more criticism and more confirmation that, hold on a second, Hamas, what they're doing is actually fine. Gideon Levy had an article in Haaretz in which he said we need to be honest here. Hamas ceremonies to release the Israeli prisoners were respectful and well organized. It wasn't easy on the Israeli eye to see an Israeli kissing the head of his guards, but the Israeli presenters rushed to say that it was orchestrated. However, it did not appear so. That is in reference to the Israeli who kissed the heads of the Palestinian resistance fighters, who were most likely his guards, who were protecting his life. And like Ilya Cohen confirmed, well, these people were saving them from the Israeli airstrikes. But there is a more serious escalation. And that serious escalation is coming from the leader of the Democrats party in Israel, who's also the ex-IDF deputy chief of staff, Yair Golan, who is a very critical voice, especially for Netanyahu. He criticized Netanyahu a lot. He said, if Netanyahu collapses the deal, the gates of hell will open. So you have someone who was the deputy chief of staff in Israel saying that the gates of hell will open on Netanyahu from Israel if he collapses the deal. So what people need to understand is, apart from the fact that there is an actual ceasefire agreement, which is solid to a very large extent, there is a lot of pressure inside of Israel. And that pressure is coming not only from the Israeli public who want to continue with the deal, from the Israeli families, but from key figures in the security establishment and key figures who were previously in the Israeli army and key politicians as well, to a level where the opposition was telling Netanyahu, look, we'll give you the safety net that you need, but continue with the ceasefire agreement. All of that is problematic for Netanyahu, because what the Israeli public are saying is, every day there are more happy Israeli families amidst all of this catastrophe. There are people who are happy to see their family members going back. And how is that happening? That's only happening by Israel going into negotiations with the Palestinian resistance and giving in exchange to get the Israelis back, giving in terms of aid, giving in more of the demands of the Gazan population. Of course, the withdrawal from the Netzarim, which was massive. That was a strategic place. The Netanyahu said, well, we're not going to withdraw from there. Returning everyone back to the north again, contrary to what Netanyahu and his generals were saying before. So we saw a lot of U-turns. However, Netanyahu is still showing or trying to flex muscles. He's trying to flex muscles because, again, he has been defeated. And Netanyahu being defeated is not something that he takes lightly. He is very arrogant with the people of Israel, with the people who he had alliances with. He's even very arrogant with the Israeli courts. Now, again, all of a sudden, he's getting this important letter when he's going to another hearing. He is refusing to show that his health file. He's refusing to show the courts that his health is fine or not really fine. The man had multiple operations now. So he's very problematic internally and externally. And if you imagine a man behaving like that internally, how will he be with the people who he's killing? Like, this was reported today in Israel that he's refusing to present his medical records to a level where the courts in Israel are threatening to issue warrants. So he is an extremely difficult and unpleasant person in his day-to-day dealing, in his normal dealings. And that is being represented fiercely in the ceasefire and in Benjamin Netanyahu trying to constantly delay things from happening. However, the positive sign that, no, this might actually continue is the fact that Israel is giving and taking with the mediators, and they are having these counter proposals. And Hamas are also showing flexibility. They're saying, fine, if they want us to release 2, and then they release 300, and then 2, and then 300 instead of 6 and instead of 4 and 600 altogether, we're also happy to consider that. Showing, of course, dynamics from Hamas, and showing how much of a pointless exercise that is from Israel. And what Israel has done in the past 16 months, in the past 15 months, well, before the ceasefire took place in Gaza, is apply all of this military pressure to get their desired objectives, try and impose their will, try and make the people kneel down, affect the social cohesion between the population and the resistance, and force the resistance to raise the white flags. And they haven't. Yet, they're still thinking that they might be able to do something in the negotiations. They will simply not. They will not succeed. The only way they can do anything if Benjamin Netanyahu keeps escalating, is try and go back to the war, which is again going to be a lost case. But the main thing is that there are attempts to solve it. There were reports that it might be resolved within 24 hours. If it's resolved within 24 hours, that means the final hurdle of phase one would have ended. And then we are only faced with phase two. And that's another reason why Benjamin Netanyahu is having these delays and putting these sticks in the wheels. Because Netanyahu wants to delay phase two as much as possible. He is going to try to extend phase one. And in accordance to the initial proposal, and from what we understand about this ceasefire agreement, because again, a lot of it is speculation and things being published as and when, because the document is not in front of us. I can't go and read 40 or 50 pages and tell you exactly what they say, because they did not publish it. But it clearly shows that if there is no agreement on phase two, or if the talks are not beginning on phase two, there will be a continuation of phase one, potentially with small mini deals. But that is not very likely to happen. If Benjamin Netanyahu would like to delay this further and try and push phase two for as long as possible, and then go into phase two thinking that he might extract more out of the Palestinian resistance and the positions and the stances and the political demands, and then go into it, that's a strategy for Benjamin Netanyahu. And the reason he's having this strategy is because he would prefer that there is no absolute end of the war, or at least the declaration of the end of the war. That would be to his benefit, because then he wouldn't have to change allies in his government. He wouldn't risk going to early elections, even with a safety net. And he would just continue to have his yes men without people giving him a headache. Because although Benjamin Netanyahu had so many allies before who know him directly and know how vile he is as a partner, as a political partner, yet he was keen to remain in the leadership, and he led Israel to 6 elections in 7 years. Like, people need to know the pattern of the man and how abhorrent he is individually. They were still looking to sacrifice and give him some sort of a safety net just to get the deal processed. But then he knows they will potentially flip on him very quickly and ask for early elections once everything is up and done. But he wants to avoid that. And he knows the only way to avoid that is in the current formula. The current formula, which includes people who were allied with him from the beginning, new partners he had in his government now who are nothing but yes men, who approve everything that he says. And he won't have a headache up until the next elections, and he can potentially look into completing the reform in the judicial system in Israel, giving him and his government, but ultimately him, full authority and control over the state of Israel. Because Benjamin Netanyahu and his plans to reform the judicial system in Israel include him making any changes that he wants. The only thing that's added to that is a small group of people having to approve it with him. And again, those 4 people would be people who Benjamin Netanyahu guarantees that they will approve everything he says, like the new defense minister, like Dermer now leading the negotiations, and like these figures in the Israeli political scene with Benjamin Netanyahu. So interesting few days ahead. We'll see how things proceed and hopefully keep covering it from there.